Richard Blackwood had always believed that money spoke louder than anything else. At 42 years old, he had built a real estate empire that earned him millions each year, and he made sure everyone knew it. That Tuesday morning, as he boarded the first-class flight from Detroit to Los Angeles, Richard wore his $3,000 Armani suit and carried an arrogance that could be felt from meters away. The man who sat next to him looked completely out of place in first class. He wore a simple worn-out hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers that had clearly seen better days. His blonde hair was messy, like he had just woken up, and he carried only a small backpack as hand luggage. Richard wrinkled his nose in disdain. How could someone like that afford a first-class ticket? "Excuse me," Richard said condescendingly, calling over the flight attendant. "I believe there's been a mistake. This gentleman clearly doesn't belong in first class. Perhaps he's confused his section." The man beside him looked up briefly, but said nothing. He just put on his headphones and closed his eyes, completely ignoring the comment. That only irritated Richard more. The flight attendant, an elegant woman named Sarah, discreetly checked the passenger's ticket and confirmed he was in the right seat. "Mr. Blackwood, all passengers are in their designated seats," she said politely. Richard couldn't believe it. All his life, he had learned that appearances mattered. You were judged by your clothes, your car, how you spoke. And there was this man, looking like a homeless person, occupying a seat that cost over $5,000. "Look at this," Richard muttered loudly enough for others to hear. "Nowadays, anyone can buy a first-class ticket. Probably spend his life savings to impress someone," he scoffed. "I bet he can't even afford the in-flight meal." The man beside him opened his eyes for a moment, looked at Richard with an unreadable expression, but still said nothing. That only fueled Richard's anger. How dare someone ignore him? He was used to commanding boardrooms, to having people hang on his every word. "You know what your problem is," Richard continued, his voice rising. "People like you think they can pretend to be something they're not. But I see through that act. You're just another loser trying to look important." Sarah approached again. "Mr. Blackwood, I must ask you to keep your voice down for the comfort of the other passengers." "Comfort?" Richard exploded. "Where was my comfort when they let this this bum sit next to me? I pay a fortune for this seat so I don't have to deal with low-class people." Other passengers began to turn and watch the scene. An elderly woman in the front row shook her head in disapproval. A Japanese businessman paused his work on his laptop to witness the drama. Richard was creating the exact type of scene he detested when it came from others, but his anger had completely clouded his judgment. The man in the hoodie finally removed his headphones and turned to Richard. His voice was calm, almost a whisper. "Man, I just want to get to LA in peace. I'm not bothering anyone." "You're not bothering anyone." Richard laughed. "Your very presence here is an insult. Look at you. You look like you haven't showered in days. Probably don't even have a decent job. What kind of work could someone like you possibly do? Pizza delivery? Janitor?" The man's patience was clearly wearing thin, but he remained composed. "You don't know me, man, and honestly, I don't want you to. Just leave me alone." "Oh, now you want me to leave you alone?" Richard was enjoying the attention from the other passengers. "But you invaded my space first. You should be back there with the rest of the riffraff, not up here pretending to be someone you're not." Sarah returned with a more serious expression. "Mr. Blackwood, if you don't lower your tone, I will have to ask the captain to consider an emergency landing." "An emergency landing? Why?" "Because I'm speaking the truth." Richard pointed at the man beside him. "This guy probably bought the ticket with dirty money, or maybe won it in a raffle. People like him don't belong here." It was then that a small child, maybe around 8 years old, stood up from her seat a few rows back. She had been watching the whole argument with wide eyes. Suddenly, she ran down the aisle toward the man in the hoodie, shouting excitedly, "Eminem! Eminem! Is it really you?" The silence that followed was deafening. Richard felt as though a bucket of ice water had been dumped over his head. Eminem, the world-famous rapper. The man who had sold over 200 million albums worldwide. The same man Richard had spent the last 20 minutes insulting and humiliating. The man in the hoodie, Marshall Mathers, known globally as Eminem, smiled gently at the child. "Hey there, sweetheart, what's your name?" "Emily." She beamed. "My dad and I listened to your music in the car. Can I get your autograph?" "Of course," Eminem said, taking a napkin and signing it for her. "But only if you promise to keep doing well in school, okay?" The girl nodded enthusiastically and ran back to her father, who was red with embarrassment, but clearly thrilled. Richard felt the floor vanish beneath him. Every eye on the plane was now fixed on him, not with admiration, but with disgust. He had just spent 20 minutes degrading one of the most successful and respected artists in the world. Someone, likely worth 10 times more than him. Richard stammered, trying to find words to apologize, but his mouth was completely dry. Eminem looked at him with a mixture of pity and disappointment. You know, man, I grew up in Detroit. I went hungry as a kid. My mom and I lived in trailers. I know what it's like to be judged for how you look, for what you wear, for where you come from. His voice was low, but each word cut like a knife. The difference is, I learned not to judge others for the same crap I went through. Richard wanted to shrink and disappear. Every word from Eminem echoed in the silent plane. Other passengers weren't even pretending not to listen. Some were discreetly recording on their phones. You want to know what I do for a living? Eminem continued. Tonight I'm performing at the Staples Center for 80,000 people. Tomorrow I've got a meeting with Universal execs about my next world tour. Next week, I'm in the studio with some young artists, starting out because I remember how hard it was to get a shot. Sarah, the flight attendant, was clearly trying not to smile as she watched Richard shrink deeper into his seat. But you know what bothers me most? Eminem asked, his voice even lower. It's not that you judged me by my clothes. It's not even that you tried to humiliate me. It's that you did it in front of a child. That girl, Emily, heard every word you said. And you were teaching her that it's okay to treat people like trash if they don't look rich. Richard felt a wave of nausea. He looked back and saw Emily watching him with a confused, sad expression. She had witnessed an adult be cruel to her idol, and it had clearly affected her. I have a daughter, Eminem went on. Haley, and if someone treated her the way you treated me, I'd be furious. But more than that, I'd be heartbroken. Heartbroken because there are people in this world teaching kids that it's okay to be cruel, okay to judge, okay to use money as a weapon to hurt others. Eminem's words echoed through the plane like a silent sermon. Richard had never felt smaller in his life. All his achievements, his money, his supposed superiority, had evaporated in minutes. I'm sorry, Richard finally whispered, his voice barely audible. I didn't know. No, Eminem gently interrupted. You didn't know who I was, but that shouldn't matter. You should have treated me with respect because I'm a human being, not because I'm famous. The issue isn't that you didn't recognize me. It's that you thought you had the right to treat someone like garbage, based on how they look. Richard felt tears sting his eyes. When was the last time he cried? Probably when he was 12 and his father died. But here he was, a 42 man, crying on a plane because a hoodie-wearing rapper had just given him the biggest life lesson he'd ever received. My wife died last year, Richard blurted out, surprising even himself. Cancer. She always said I was too hard on people. Said I'd forgotten how to be human. The tears now flowed freely down his face. I think she was right. Eminem studied his face for a long moment. There was something in Richard's vulnerability that felt real. I'm sorry for your loss, he said softly. But using your pain as an excuse to hurt others won't bring her back. I know, Richard sobbed. I know. It's just, I'm so angry. Angry at her for leaving me. At God. At the world. And I took it out on you. And that was completely wrong. The plane was now completely silent, except for Richard's muffled sobs. Even the flight attendants had paused their work to watch this unexpected confession. Eminem sighed deeply. Man, I understand anger. When my best friend Proof was murdered, I almost lost it. I wanted to break everything, hurt everyone. But in the end, the only person I was hurting was myself, and the people who loved me. Richard looked at Eminem through his tears. How did you get through it? Therapy. A lot of therapy. And realizing that, honoring the memory of those we lose, means becoming better people, not worse. Eminem paused. Your wife. What was her name? Margaret, Richard whispered. Maggie, she was an elementary school teacher. She loved kids. Always said they were our future. Eminem looked back at Emily sitting with her father. Then she wouldn't be proud of how you acted in front of a child, would she? Richard followed his gaze and saw Emily still watching. When she noticed him looking, she gave a shy wave. Richard's heart broke. No, he said. She'd be ashamed. Then change. Eminem said simply. You have a choice now. Keep being bitter and spreading negativity, or honor your wife's memory by becoming someone she'd be proud of. Richard nodded, wiping his eyes. You're right. You're completely right. He turned toward Emily. Emily, he called gently. The girl stood up and approached him cautiously, still a bit wary. Emily, I want to apologize to you, Richard said, kneeling in the aisle to be at her level. The way I treated my friend here was very wrong. Adults sometimes do stupid things, and I did something very stupid today. Emily looked at him with her big, serious eyes. Did you hurt his feelings? She asked. Yes, I did. And that was very wrong of me. Emily glanced at Eminem, who nodded encouragingly. It's okay, she said to Richard. My mum always says when we mess up, we should say sorry and try to do better next time. Your mum is very wise, Richard said, voice trembling. And you're very special for being so kind to me, even after I behaved badly. Emily smiled and returned to her seat. Richard turned to Eminem, who watched the interaction with a thoughtful expression. Thank you, Richard said, for teaching me a lesson I needed to learn, for being a better person than I deserved. Eminem extended his hand. Everyone deserves a second chance, man. The question is what you'll do with yours. Richard shook his hand firmly. You said you work with young artists starting out. Yeah, why? I own several buildings in Detroit, spaces that could be turned into studios or community centers. If you're interested, I'd like to donate some to programs that help kids in the community. He paused. In memory of Maggie. She always wanted me to use my money to help people, especially kids. Eminem smiled. The first genuine smile Richard had seen from him the entire flight. Man, I think your wife would be really proud to hear that. The rest of the flight passed in peace. Richard and Eminem talked about Detroit, music, grief, and redemption. By the time they landed in Los Angeles, they had exchanged numbers and made plans to meet the following week to discuss the community center project. As they left the plane, Emily ran up to Richard. Sir, she said, thank you for saying sorry. That was really brave. Richard knelt again. Thank you, Emily. You taught me something very important today. What was it? That sometimes the wisest people are the smallest. Emily giggled and ran to catch up with her dad. Richard watched her go, feeling something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Eminem put a hand on Richard's shoulder. Hey, man, you're gonna be okay. It takes time, but you'll be okay. Richard nodded. Thanks, Marshall, for everything. You're welcome, Richard. And remember, Maggie's watching. Make her smile. 6 months later, Richard stood on stage at one of the community centers he had donated, watching a performance by local children. The music program Eminem helped launch was thriving, giving dozens of young people a safe space after school, where they could learn music, art, and life skills. Emily was in the front row with her father, who had moved to Detroit to work on one of Richard's projects. She waved when she saw him, and Richard waved back, remembering the wisdom of an 8-year-old girl who helped change his life. That night, when Richard got home, he sat beside Maggie's photo on his nightstand. I hope you're proud, love, he whispered. I'm finally becoming the man you always knew I could be. And for the first time since his wife's death, Richard Blackwood slept in peace, knowing he had found a purpose greater than his pain. Sometimes, he thought, the greatest life lessons come from the most unexpected places. Even a man in a hoodie on a first-class flight, who had the kindness to see through cruelty and reach a broken heart beneath.